Ooh, hello, hello, hi. Can you hear me all? Welcome to our live stream. Sorry for the late start. I was here on time, but I think I didn't press the right button or whatever. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. Um, so first up, let me know if you can hear me loud and clear in the chat. Otherwise, I'll make my adjustments on the mic. And once all it's good, we are gonna go into some really awesome VBA live stream this month. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, cool. People have said they can hear hear me all right. That is awesome. Tom says maybe I overslept. God. Yeah, yeah. Usma says yes. So that's all good. Um, All right, tell me, where are you watching this from? Which part of the world you're tuning in from, and what sort of VBA work have you done previously in the chat, or if you're watching it in replay later on as well? So yeah, which part of world you are? I know we have got a kind of like a semi-busy chat room going on before the stream started. I even had a poll asking you whether you have done any VBA code, and we have got 300 votes, and about 220 of you have not done any VBA coding this year. It could be because you didn't want to or whatever, but it was good to see that. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa! This this chat is running crazy. I'll probably won't be able to catch up with you all. Uh, India, Tamil Nadu says Ambumani, and Parul says she's or he watching from London, and Brian from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, uh, Eddie from Nigeria, Jairam S from Chennai, India. We got people from Coimbatore, Nepal, Sweden. Here is a funny story. Exactly 14 years ago, even though while I was not in Sweden on this date, I was in Sweden 14 years ago in the month of September, October, November, all through 2009. You might think, oh, why are you being so specific? That's because today happens to be a very special day for me. It's my kid's birthday. I have got twins. Some of you know it. So it's their 14th birthday, and I was in Sweden when my wife was kind of about to deliver, and I flew back to India to be with her for the delivery and welcome the twins into the world. Uh, Mozaz says from Singapore, and Hassan from Gambia, and oh wow, wow, wow. Ninat says UK. Working as a data analyst in a company where Excel and VBA are widely used, so I have been building a lot of tools with VBA. Okay, so this was the scary part for me when I wanted to do a VBA live stream. I have been, for the lack of better words, you can call me as a hobby coder um, when it comes to VBA. I mean, I do know quite a bit of programming. I have done uh, more than my fair share of coding in my life, but I am always like to dabble in things. So I like to learn Python, VBA, this and that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So when it comes to VBA, nowadays I consider myself to be like a VBA occasional developer. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. But it is good to see all of you coming in and sharing your time with me and being on this live. So good to have you all. We'll put our official welcome message, which is let me know what is it that you're drinking. I'm going to take off this message as well so we can. Ravindra says happy birthday. Thank you. Thanks for the happy birthday message to the kids. And I'm just going to move this guy a little bit about. So let me know what you're drinking. That was the other reason why the stream was kind of started couple of minutes late, because I went downstairs to grab a cup of coffee, let my dog out because it's quite early in the morning here in Wellington, New Zealand. And by the time I got back up, I thought, okay, I had everything ready, and I hit the button, and then OBS gave me a message saying you need to set this song up. So that was that. Yeah, so it's. Oh, we got hazelnut coffee from Jim. Enjoy the drink, my friend. And Randy is having water. A lot of people are drinking coffee. Um, Brian posted something that looks like some really fancy thing. It's just tap water. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Green tea. And Swati says it's dinner time here in India, Hyderabad. Obviously, it's dinner time. So, yeah, enjoy the dinner with a little bit of VBA coding. Uh, Anand is probably having my favorite drink in the world, mango juice. All right. Whatever you're drinking or having, enjoy it. Sit back and join me on this kind of like, I would say this is an intermediate to beginner to intermediate level VBA session. I'll try to add a little bit more advanced glimpses of VBA if possible, depending on how far we go. So, what are we going to do? We're going to do three things. I made a note here on my notepad to make sure that I'm not missing any of them. The number one thing that I want to cover in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the live stream going forward is a quick introduction to VBA. So maybe we'll do that for first 15 minutes. I want to explain what VBA is, how it appears within Excel, how to use it, and how to get started with it. So that's the first goal. Then the second thing is to create a simple practical scenario based thing using VBA so that you can understand what VBA is and how it would fit in to the world of doing things in your job. For this purpose, I'm going to pick something relatively simple because again the idea is to not complicate the things so that you can understand the language, the system, the concepts better. So the idea that I am having, you can put a feedback right away now, say that, oh no, that's not a good idea. Let's do something else, Chandoo, or let me know if you're happy with it. And the idea is I'm thinking to build a simple to-do list application using Excel. It's a simple thing, you can understand it. And even if you don't know VBA, you can use something else in Excel to do this. So you're not going to miss out tremendously, but because it's simple, we will not be lost in too much of the detail. So that's what I thought. But if you think there is some other simpler thing or different thing that we could do, put that as well. I'll try to pivot now, excuse the pun, and do it. And then the third one, so once we cover the basics, once we build a really simple thing, then we are gonna, whatever that simple thing is, we are gonna take that and enhance this. Before we go further into the actual VBA side of this stream, I want to give you some couple of kind of like announcements. Number one is use the chat to talk among yourselves or ask any questions while I'm explaining things. If you're asking a question, put a Q in the front and ask me that question. That way I can spot it in the hundreds of messages that are coming. And the second thing, this is really important in live streams like this, is if you put some message and I don't see that, don't spam it. I can see somebody, Mohan Krishna or whatever, spamming same message, posting it 10 times. This is not cool. So be nice. If you post it once, someone will see it. Otherwise, don't worry about it. And the third thing if you know a better way of doing something that I'm explaining, put the comment or chat message there so that others can see it and help each other out as well as help me. Because, like I mentioned earlier, even though I've done a lot of VBA coding in my life, as we are moving more and more towards futuristic technologies and enhanced Excel, I'm using less and less VBA. So I'll talk a little bit more about that once we get into VBA, but that is that. Mm, so I'll quickly address some of the questions that are coming. Faceless says, will this video be available to watch later? It's night and bedtime. Yes, of course, that is the plan. Usually for my live streams, I don't advertise that they can be watched later all the time, simply because it's all live. So sometimes there can be a technical difficulty or something funny going on or whatever. And, I may not want to show that thing later on. But feel free to check back tomorrow if you have got to go to bed. The other reason I try to put it in the weekend is because of this. So even if have you can always stretch your time a little bit in the weekend. Weekdays is a little bit busy. Um, so that's that. Yeah, Tom says sounds like a great plan. So let's go with that. Um, and we got some specific questions already, like, is module the only place where we can write VBA code, etc. You will understand some of these as we get into the actual stuff. Right now we're still kind of building up. Think of this like the introductory scenes in a movie. I also want to mention that how long this is going to take. Right now it's 5:15, so 15 minutes into the start time. Even though I'm hoping, for the next 60 to 75 minutes is going to be the real content. And then I'll hang around for a bit at the end to take and answer questions and share my views, etc. Another thing that I will briefly talk during the stream is how VBA compares to Python, Office scripts, two other programming options right now available in Excel, as well as how VBA is used by me these days. Like, how do I use VBA? Because everybody has got their own things with VBA, but personally for me, what I see as a valuable thing in VBA, where I use it and where I don't use it. So I'll talk about that because this is really important when you are trying to learn and use VBA. If you don't know when to use it, then chances are you will abuse it or you will misuse it half the time. So that's a good practice as a developer to keep in mind. VBA is a tool, and you may want to use it only for certain things and not other things. So that's going to be another thing. All right. With that introduction, I think we have built this up enough. So I'm going to hide the what are you drinking scrolling message there. But whatever you're drinking, feel free to continue that. And let's go into that. All right. So I'm just gonna quickly start up Excel and move my windows a little bit around, so it all looks a little bit too busy in my mind. I'll minimize this guy. And okay, so here I have got Excel. I'll show you a simple demo because when I wanted to run this stream, I posted a message yesterday, and in that message, I wanted to tell people that, hey, I'm doing a VBA stream tomorrow. Come and join me. So I wanted to create something fun, so I made this little VBA thing. It's a one page VBA application. It just says click me. When you click on it, it's gonna show a box here. It says don't forget VBA live stream tomorrow, and then a button there. See you soon. I click that, it closes off. You can click. So this is a really simple VBA thing that I built just to kind of build the buzz around this whole thing. I thought it'll be a cool thing to see. This is not a practical application for VBA unless you have a YouTube channel or whatever, and you wanted to kind of create some interest on something, there is no other practical value for this kind of a thing. Maybe there is some, I don't know. But anyhow, we'll go create a blank file. I'm gonna close this other guy around. I'll make one other adjustment to my computer. I should have done this before, but sometimes, life happens, so you tend to forget these things. Which is, I'll change my cursor color to a different one so that you can actually see it better. Um, okay, so you can't really see it while it is in the Excel grid, but you can see it when it is up there in a, it's a purple color one. So I like to have it like that, and I'm also gonna quickly enable zoom it. We are there. Okay. All right. So we are here in Excel right now. I'm not doing anything. So when I'm doing something, I will obviously zoom into that area so you can see what I'm doing. But I'm using Excel 365, even though um, I'm using Excel 365. You can literally use VBA to in pretty much any version of Excel. Like unless I don't really want to say unless what, because I don't remember what version of Excel didn't have VBA. I think it has been around for a really long time. So yeah, you will have to be using something very very old for VBA to not work. But yeah, uh, the one thing that you may want to do, again, this is not necessary, but it helps you a lot, is to enable the developer ribbon if you want to use VBA quite often. It's not requirement, because even if that is not there, you can still use VBA. But if you have developer ribbon, then you can get into VBA quite quickly. So if you don't see developer ribbon, it's a really simple thing. You can just right click anywhere on the ribbon, customize the ribbon. And once you're on this screen, you want to check the developer option right here. So that's the developer thing right there. You want to enable that and click OK, and that's going to add the developer ribbon. It doesn't require any restart or anything. You don't need admin rights. You don't need to have special privileges or whatever. You can just enable that, and that'll give you a ribbon through which you can get in and out of VBA and customize some of the other things quite easily. It's not necessary, like I said. Even if you don't have it, you can still use VBA, but I like to keep this on because it gives me other things. So what is VBA? VBA is a programming interface built into Microsoft Excel as well as other Office software. So you once you know how to use VBA in Excel, potentially you can use VBA with Outlook, you can use it with PowerPoint, you can use it with Word. You can actually use it to connect one to another. So for example, you can write some VBA code in Excel that can connect to Outlook and do something there. So but you press a button in Excel, it can take a screen value that you're seeing in Excel and then compose an email with that in Outlook and send that email. This is the real powerful scenario of how VBA works in the practical world. And pretty much that is how I use VBA anytime I'm actually building something for somebody or for myself. Like take what is in Excel and then use it elsewhere in a more elegant manner. What does the words VBA stand for? It stands for Visual Basic for Applications. I think so. And as the name suggests, it is a programming language that is derived from the programming language called BASIC. Now, I don't know how many of you have actually done any coding or learning how to code back in school or college days. But when I was learning how to code, this is like many, many years ago. So, my first programming language that I learned is BASIC language. So basic is a computer programming language using which you can tell computers how what you want to do and how you want it to be done, and computer will do it. So you can ask computer to do things like, go through each of these files and do me something there. You can use basic programming language to do that. You can think of basic as a language same as Python or Java or JavaScript, or any of the languages like R or Rust or whatever. So Microsoft added that same basic language, an enhanced version of that, as a backend tool to all these Office applications. So you can use that to tell Excel how you want certain things to be done. Now, back when this was added, let's just say 2003 Excel. I don't know exactly when this is added, but I remember personally using VBA since Excel 2003, even before probably. Excel had quite a bit of capabilities, but it also had a lot of limitations. So, having a programmable interface that I can use to customize what I can do with Excel, and I can take the capabilities of Excel and enhance them to different levels, was really game changing, because that means there is no limit on what I can achieve with Excel. I can build an Excel file, but that can connect to a database and post values to the database and all of that. So people were building all sorts of crazy, amazing, and awesome applications with VBA. Fast forward to today, 2023, when you are learning this, it's not the same Excel anymore. Excel itself has come really far. There is a lot more capabilities built right into Excel. A simple example of where I would have used VBA back in 2010, 2015, and now is, for example, if I have got some values in cells, so we'll say something here. So three values, nothing really fancy, just three values are in the cells. And I want to combine everything into one big text. So I would like to see something here. That's really what I want. Maybe I want to have some spaces in the middle. So something like that. This sort of a functionality is not so easy to do with older Excel, because we didn't have any function that can easily take a bunch of values and combine them. For example, if these values are numbers, so I have 1, 2, 3, I can use the sum function and combine these values like that. You already know these kind of things. But if I have got text values, there was no function available in Excel at some point to combine them. So the only function that we had was called concatenate, and it would take it wouldn't take three values. So you see what happens when I try to use this. Right now it works. I mean, it doesn't work really, because it's kind of using a spilled range to return the same thing again. Whereas the correct way of doing concatenation here is you would have to say D3, D4, D5 like this, and then you'll get something here. This is painful, especially if I want to combine 50 values. So I wrote a VBA function to concatenate values and create one big value out of that, and and then install that VBA function into Excel, so that every time I use Excel, it would do this for me. And I even wrote an article about this on my blog. This is like many years ago. And for a really long time, it used to get hundreds of people come to that article every day, copy that code and use it in their work, because there is no easy way to do this in Excel at that point in time. But now we have got a function in Excel called concat that can do exactly what that VBA macro was doing. Something here. In fact, you have another function called text join that can take a delimiter. So I can say use space on this, and I'll get something here. So you see what's happening. The capabilities of Excel have evolved, which means there is less need for us to use VBA for some of the more obvious things. There is still a lot of scenarios where I would use VBA, but most of the things for which I had learned how to use VBA are no longer relevant. A more classic example is uh, I used to write VBA code to combine things in different files, but now I use Power Query for that. Okay, enough introduction of all of that. We're now gonna do something with VBA so you can understand exactly where this technology would fit in. I'll add another sheet, and let me quickly scan through the chat to make sure I'm not missing any important messages like we can't hear you kind of thing. Mm, okay, cool. I think everything is good. There is all right. We don't need to worry about that. There's some messages there, but I'll come back to those messages. I don't think anything pressing is there. Um, and so our first example is we would like to just quickly understand how to get into VBA, write some code, etc. One of the awesome things with Excel is like if you're learning most programming languages, you wouldn't find this anywhere except VBA maybe, is you have a built-in recorder that can listen to what you want to do and then write the code for it. I mean, there is probably some parallel examples in other Office applications like Power Apps, etc. have done this, but there is a recorder built into it, and this is the reason why I asked you to enable developer ribbon. If you go to the developer ribbon, you'll see that there is a uh, record macro button here, using which I can record a macro. Macro is a piece of VBA code that can listen to what you're doing, and then it can, like a parrot, repeat your actions when you execute it again. So we are going to use this to kind of get into the world of VBA. You can just add a blank sheet and you can do some actions here. While you're doing that, you can record and you can repeat it. I like to use this very simple example of a really repetitive and extremely boring data job. Imagine you have to do this job every day. Like you're paid good money to go to office every day, open an Excel file, go to the cell B3 and fill color into the cell B3. This is all your job. There is nothing else to your job. All you have to do is every day open a file, put B3 into yellow color. After doing it for a couple of weeks, you thought, oh, I don't want to do this. I want to automate this so I can sit back and let Excel do this work for me. So that's what we are going to do. We want to write a macro that would fill a color into a cell that you have selected. So we'll go to the developer ribbon, click on record macro. You can give it a name. I'm going to call this as fill color. And click OK. Right? That's you can put any name there. It doesn't really matter. And once you've done that, you may want to click on the cell where you want to color this. So I'll go to B3. I'll select that. But let's just say you were somewhere else. You may want to bring the cursor back to B3 and then fill the color. That's it. Your macro action is done. You've selected the cell, you filled the color. And now you can go back to the developer ribbon and stop the recording. You can do it from here, or you can also do it from the status bar. Very bottom, there is a stop button here. It used to be a lot more discoverable earlier, but now it's kind of in single color, so it's harder to see. Anyway, you stop the recording. A key idea to keep in mind when you're using the recorder is you want to do just the necessary actions. You don't want to do anything unnecessary like save the file or scroll down or move to a different place, right click somewhere. None of the actions that you don't want to do that. Just the bare minimum. So we're going to stop the recording now. And now our macro is built. It is doing that action that you have told it to do. But how do I see this? And how do I, more importantly, repeat this? Because tomorrow I come, I don't want to record again and fill the color. Tomorrow I want to just hit the button and it should be doing. So tomorrow's scenario is we go to a blank sheet. So we'll imagine this is the tomorrow's workbook. And here I want the color to appear in B3. So you can go to the developer and hit on macros. It will show you the fill color macro that you have here. You can select that and run. And you can see that the color immediately appears here. Okay. Next day, macros, run, the color appears again. So this is, in really simple words, this is what VBA is. You record something and then every time you want it to happen, you just run it, it runs. You don't even need to know what is happening behind scenes for this to run, as long as you took the precautions. Now let's go ahead and see the code so you can understand what's happening. Like, what does this language look like, how this all behaves. So you can, for example, click on the macros and select the fill color and edit it. Alternatively, from the developer ribbon, you can click on Visual Basic. Whatever you do, you will be able to get into a separate back screen application called Visual Basic Editor. This is called VBE or Visual Basic Editor. And if you expand the modules on the current workbook, module 1, you will see your code for this. This code, I can read it all right on my screen, but because we are streaming, I'm just going to make sure that the text is a bit zoomed up, which will also give you an idea of how to change the editor. So we're going to muck around with that. I'm hoping, yeah. So you may want to go into tools, options, editor format, and then the size is 14 points. I'm going to change this to 20 points. And I want to try a different font. Courier New is all right, but it doesn't have a little bit of density to it. So let's see if there is something else. Otherwise, we are just going to keep it like that. We're going to leave it there, right? I don't know if we can make it bold. Anyhow, hopefully this is readable. If not, let me know and I'll try some other font. I also want to quickly give a shout out to Vinod for a super chat. Thank you so much, Vinod, for that lovely gesture. And let me see if there is any. So there is a question from Bilal. I was going to get into this question. I'm just going to make sure I. Just give me a second here. I want to do something. Oh, well, I don't know what to do. Okay, hopefully you can read the code all right. And the question from Bilal says, has it been on the same workbook, the macro that you wrote? What if I want to run this macro on a different file every day? So we have been running this color thing on the same file all this while. But what if you need to color this but on a different file every time? Talk about this as well. Hopefully a little bit later, not right now. But for now, we want to understand what is going on. So this is the code. Anything in the single quote here, it's a comment. You can literally write anything here. Like you can say, I love my dog. And VBA wouldn't really bother about it. It's a comment, so it doesn't pay any attention to that. The word sub is an indicator that this is a contained piece of code. So anything between sub and end sub is all one piece of code. This reminds me, subscribe to the channel. Sorry, couldn't really help it. So if you're new here, you enjoy what I do, and you're thinking, oh, this guy is good, we like what he's doing, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I post a lot of content about Excel, VBA, and Power BI and other data technologies. But more important is, if you're watching this, feel free to like this. That really helps me in real time when we are doing the stream. Anyhow, sub, and then the name, whatever name we have given when you are recording the macro. So you set sub, fill color, and end sub. So that's the piece of code. Sub and end sub is the starting point and ending point for that macro. It's a older computing word. Subroutine is the full word, but you just say sub and that's what it is. So the first step we are doing is we are selecting the cell B3. So we're saying range B3 dot select, and then you're filling the color. Even though filling color is a single action, VBA recorder kind of records a lot of things. So it says with the selection dot interior, that means the internal portion of the cell, you want the color to be a solid color, not a pattern color. And it should be theme color accent too. So even though it's an orange color, that's not really how VBA sees this color. It sees this as in the Excel color theme. So this is the color theme that we are right now using. I think these last 6 are called accent colors. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have picked the second color. So that's what it is. So that's how it really. So it doesn't really use an RGB kind of a thing unless you specifically go to more colors and fill the specific color. Up until that time, it's gonna just use the theme color. So it's not technically orange. See what happens. New page, and I go to page layout and change my color theme from this to some other theme, like let's go with this, right? And then run the macro. Out of memory. Why are you out of memory? Anyhow, probably because of the stream, but now the color has changed, so it's no longer orange, it's violet color. So that's the thing. In fact, that's not the only violet color. All of these would have also changed it back to violet. This is because they never had orange to begin with. They had the second color in the color theme. So when you change the color theme, they will all have their color changed. We're going to switch back to the office theme. This way it will be consistent. Otherwise, it looks kind of crazy everywhere. And let's go back here. And then it also has tint and shade and some other blah, blah, blah stuff, whatever. So it's saying second color and first tab option of the color. That's really what this is. You can add other stuff in here if you want. For example, let's say your job is just got a little bit more interesting. You got promoted. So now your job is no longer just to fill the color with orange every day, but also print the word awesome in that cell. Every day, go to B3 cell, change the color, print the word awesome. You might be tempted to record another macro, but you don't have to. Now that you're already here, you can write some code. So let's write the code that would put the value awesome into the cell B3. You can do it in two ways. You can kind of do it like this: range.b3.value is equal to awesome. So that's the extra line of code that you can write. Here we are saying range of B3, but remember what is the first operation that we are doing? We are selecting B3 and then filling the color. So we have already selected. So notice what the recorder did the second step. It's not going and saying with range B3 dot interior. It is saying with selection. So whatever is selected, do this operation on top of it. So you can use this special thing called selection also to do this. So you can say it like this. You can alternatively, I'm going to leave it like this for now, but feel free to test it out. You can replace the word there with selection.value and then try that out as well. So I'm going to save, I don't want to save this right now. We'll save it later. For now, we are going to test our new macro on a blank sheet. So I'll add another blank sheet. And every time going to the developer and clicking the macro and running is getting a bit painful. So I wanted to have an option to trigger this macro by clicking a button. But it's not that simple. We'll have to think a little bit more logically about it. For example, you can insert a shape here and then write the word do my job on this. And then when I click on do my job, this is gonna run that macro behind and then fill the color. That's the intention. So you can right click on this guy, assign a macro to it. I'll show it in slow motion. Right click, assign a macro. This is the button. You can put this assign macro on any kind of shapes, images, or icons that you're bringing into Excel. And and that opens the same screen as earlier, and you can select the fill color from here and click OK. And now if I click on do my job, this is gonna be a painful thing to see every time. I guess because we are live streaming and I don't know what else is going on in my computer. Hopefully it's not running a video game or something. Um, but it did the job. It printed the color and it wrote the word awesome in the cell B3. The problem with this button is if I add a new sheet and I want to do this, now I must bring that button here again and do it. It's kind of like useless, isn't it? Because I might as well just go to the developer and click on macros and just run it from there rather than trigger it from the button. So the button approach is useful if I have got a macro and I want to just run it. But for this kind of a thing where I need to run this on different places every time, it's kind of helpless. So this is where you need to have another technique, something that doesn't sit in a page. So that would be like having the button on the ribbon up here. If I have got a button here in my ribbon that says do my job and I click on that, I can go to any sheet. I'll have that button right there. So that's what we are going to achieve next. For this to happen, let's first save this file. This way, we won't lose anything. I'm going to save this. When the live stream is done, I'll post a copy of this file in the video description so you can download it. Not that there is any tremendous piece of code in here or whatever, but it's always helpful to have something to refer to. But feel free to replicate all these steps on your own. That's a good way to learn actually. So we're going to save this as live demo. And this is the critical thing. When you have VBA code, you can't save the file as XLSX anymore. You need to choose a format that is enabling macros. So there is an option called XLSM. You can also use binary option, but let's go with this. And that's the important bit. Also, when you have XLSM files, when you reopen or you email this to colleague and they reopen, Microsoft throws a warning saying there's macros in this. Do you want to enable and blah, blah, blah. Because VBA code can get a little bit crazy and sometimes do harmful operations on your computer, like, delete files and whatnot. So it will show a warning to anybody when they open a file with VBA. Anyhow, now that we saved, I would like to add a button on my ribbon that will trigger this macro on whichever sheet I am. So I'll go to my ribbon. I'll customize the ribbon, right click on that. And from here where it says popular commands, I'm gonna choose macros. So from popular commands, you want to go to macros and you're gonna find all the macros that are available for you in your Excel. I have got a lot because I have added some add-ins and whatnot. But here is our fill color macro. So this is the little guy. You want to locate that and find this, and then you want to add that using this button here to one of the ribbons. So when you are adding, you need to first pre-select the ribbon and an area of the ribbon where you would like to add this. I don't think you can add things anywhere directly. You may want to create a group or whatever. It will show you a warning when you can do it. So we'll try this. We'll select this and we are going to add this to, let's go with the font area. So right here, I'll add that. Yeah, so it doesn't want to add there because it's a built-in ribbon. So what you want to do is you want to create a group first. So you click on new group. It'll create a new group here. You can rename this. You can say my macros and that will be the group, and you can add the fill color into that. You can leave it as it is. You can also rename it, and kind of change the icon if you want. Let's go with something that looks a little bit fun. Yeah, I think that's fine. So that will be the thing. And when you click OK, you'll now have a button here in the ribbon that says fill color. And wherever I am, I click on that, it's going to do that. And this is really crazy why it keeps happening, but we'll just ignore that for a minute. So yeah, we're going to be seeing that for a while. If anyone know why this is happening, let me know. I'm trying to see if there is any programs that I can close. I'll close the some of these things. I don't want to close other things because they're all necessary for the streaming stuff, and I definitely believe there is enough memory. It's probably something funny going on somewhere. Anyhow, there is also a super chat from Akshay. Thank you, Akshay. He also says, love your videos. I switched job and got 2x hike thanks to your teachings. Oh, that is really awesome, brother. Congratulations. Awesome chocolate case studies helped me a lot. Thank you, Chandu. You're welcome, and more power to you. All right. So, so far, so good. Now, this particular fill color thing is not a great way of doing this. This is because that macro exists only in the live demo file. If I go to another file, if I open a new workbook, now this workbook doesn't really have that code, but the ribbon still shows fill color. If I try to do it, it will work because what is happening is that other file is also open, right? We have got the other file open on my computer, so it can locate that macro. See what happens. I don't want to jinx anything because sometimes these errors can actually crash Excel or whatnot. But if I close the live demo file, now try to go here and fill color, I'll get a some sort of a weird warning message because what we are trying to do is run a macro in this file, but that macro is not here. It's somewhere else that is closed. So it needs to open the file, and it kind of creates a security hole in your system. This is first time in a long while I'm seeing this, but if I enable and then it wants to open that file, so now I have to enable macros here, and at this point it has actually opened my live demo file for this to work. So this is the problem with this kind of a technique. There is a better way to do this called personal macro workbook. Feel free to google it up and find the instructions on how to do it. I got articles on my website on how to set up personal macro add-in and then use that so that any macro you write is consistently available across all your files. But for now, we got the basics covered. That is the first part of the video where I wanted to showcase the introduction to VBA. I'm going to close this guy. I don't need to save that. And then let's go into the second bit, which is where we are going to create a simple to-do application that will use this very technique that I have shown you to create a simple application that can kind of do the task for us. Um, so this happened like somebody was following up and their laptop crashed. Sir, my laptop just crashed. Oh my god. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get you into there, brother. And it shouldn't really crash because we're not doing anything, like we're not playing with fire or whatever. But many times when you're coding, you need to be careful with the actions that you're doing because otherwise you think you're doing something, but the computers, they hear it in a different way. So make sure that you are that. And I'll come back to this view because I would like to show some of the messages and kind of address them, but I didn't set it up. Okay, copy and all right. and I'm just looking. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show. Oh, not here. You stay here. So Tyzoon asks, can you include the use of ChatGPT for VBA? I know there is a lot of temptation to use like AI tools like ChatGPT and whatnot, but probably not for simple examples like filling color. You don't want to ask ChatGPT to teach you how to fill color. It's going to produce either more clumsy code or something unreliable or whatever. Definitely use it to get into more interesting concepts, but for this it's highly recommended that you try it out. These are simple examples and learn on your own, at least understand the basics, then you can get into more chat gpt kind of a thing. So hopefully that is kind of giving you some idea. I might do, if there is sufficient interest, post a comment, chat, or you know tell me in some other way that you would want to see a chat GPT plus VBA kind of a thing. I'll make a video explaining how you can use it. Personally, for me, I don't use it that much simply because I know VBA enough that if I go and ask it and then come back, and my total time to develop would be so much more than if I just start coding right away. So that's pretty much my way of looking at this. But I would use ChatGPT for other things. But anyway, if you guys want to learn that, put a comment, and I'll make a note and I'll prioritize that later on as per my plan. Um, there's a lot more messages. So next, okay, whatever this is, how do you change the column width automatically? Awesome is running into C3. Yeah, you cannot contain awesomeness. But on a more serious note, what if we want to change the column width? We can take this up as a little challenge. We're going to try this as part of the next exercise so that we'll bring this as a feature into our to-do list application. So let's keep that in mind. Um, and and then Randy says pivot table in VBA with criteria. Um, you can do it. Personally, pivot tables are anything more simpler than working with simple ranges. It gets a lot more complicated very quickly. This is because even though for our eyes pivot table is just like a bunch of cells on the spreadsheet, uh, from a backend perspective, everything is different for VBA. So this is where it's helpful if we go back to the code view. Here, what VBA uses is, I'm just going to hide your comment so we can kind of look at the thing. VBA uses a special type of programming called object oriented programming. So everything is an object. It's like range B3 is an object of the type range, and then you're doing operations on it. You're setting the colors or setting the value. So for us, a pivot table is like a cell or a bunch of cells, but actually pivot table is a pivot table object. And within the pivot table, you have different objects to hold different things. So you have got row labels, and values and calculations and whatnot, totals and subtotals. So this is where even a simple operation like changing the layout of pivot or adding something else or moving from one place to another might involve writing a, a tremendous amount of code to achieve that. So, and the problem would be you won't be able to do that unless you have good clarity about the object model behind scenes. That is like how various objects are linked up and whatnot. Again, this all sounds technical, but essentially, I'll put a like a blank canvas notepad here. I'll do one of these crude drawings just so you can understand what it is. So essentially, you might think pivot table as one object. Okay, I'm probably wrong here when I am explaining the structure because I don't remember what the internal architecture of pivot table object model is. but it could be that internally they're represented as um, labels, that things go on rows or columns. Then you might have values as two objects belonging to pivot table, and then there might be a separate sub object called totals, um, that kind of corresponds to how the totals are. um, and there might be another object for the slicers or the filters that connect to pivot table, and many other things. So unless you have some idea of how these objects are all placed and linked together, you will not be able to get very far. Even simple thing like, forget about pivot table, if I am doing something like changing the color of a cell, for us in our mind we have got a cell B3 and it has a color. This is how we are seeing it on the output level. But internally, you have seen the VBA code. The color doesn't really belong to the range. It belongs to an object called interior. So you can't really set the color on B3. You have to set the color on B3's interior, and then the color goes there. So you wouldn't really know this concept unless you're familiar with the object model or the recorder is properly recording and showing you. And many times, what the VBA recorder does is it doesn't record everything that you're doing on the screen, because it was not built to do that, or those new objects were not available when the coding engine was initially built, or whatever. So for these reasons, it's kind of trickier to directly jump into more. Uh, Even though they sound simple, they might get more complicated. And this is also the reason why I kind of discourage people who are starting to get into chat GPT kind of things, because while chat GPT or AI assistants can produce the code, um, they might give you a solution that is a little bit more over engineered, or it, or it would require sufficient knowledge of the underlying model for you to actually customize and change or work with later on. Again, no, nothing against those things, but if you are going down that path, you may want to learn a little bit more, or you may want to consider the alternatives. Like, is it worth the effort to write 300 lines of VBA code just to change the pivot table, or do it manually, and just suck it up as part of the workflow? So this is where the trade-offs come in. Again, we'll go there in a minute, but for now, let's go back and define the agenda for our next part, which is to create a simple um, to-do list application. So here the idea is we want to build a to-do list. It's really simple. I'll keep it as simple as possible, but we will add layers of complexity as time permits. So in Awesome Chocolates, everybody is assigned a bunch of activities, and as part of the activities that you are supposed to do, every time you finish an activity, you're supposed to say done against that activity, and also record the date and time when you finished that activity. So this is the job. So you can have like a to do item, and then status, timestamp, 3 columns literally. Okay. And then that's the heading. So we'll put that bold, underline this, and this is where my actual stuff will go. Okay. I'm not even using tables for this, even though you can use tables. For now, let's not use tables, because again, in your eyes, you might think table is a list of cells, but VBA sees that as a separate object called list object. And we'll get bogged down into the murky details of what is a list object, how to access things, and all of that. It can get crazy very quickly. So we'll use a bunch of cells because this is more perceivable in our eyes. So here, we are gonna fill some activities. I don't want to do anything crazy, so we'll just say activity 1, and then I'm just gonna drag this down. So we'll get 21 activities. Okay. And as you finish an activity, you want to say done, and then fill up the timestamp here. So 6:03 a.m., something like that. Not exactly 6:03, because this would not be 6:03 of today. It will be 6:03 of 1st January 1900 or whatever. So you will want this to be 24th September 6:03 a.m. kind of thing. Um, so that's really what it is. But you don't want to type these things manually. What you would want to do is, initially you want to pick a cell, and when you run the macro, like a macro would be there that is called mark as done. It needs to, for whatever cell you selected, it needs to say done, and then in the adjacent cell it needs to print the timestamp. This is the initial piece of code. Later on we may want to customize this a bit more. So that's the intention there. Here again, we don't want to use the recorder. We'll want to write this code ourselves. That way we can see the flow of the logic and figure out what errors can happen and whatnot. And when I run the code, I want to also make sure that it doesn't do anything garbagey. Like for example, if I select this and run the code, I don't want to overwrite this cell with a done. I would want the activity to be marked done only if I selected the status column. And then later we'll debate whether that is user friendly or if there is a better way to handle this. But for now, the macro should only run when you are on this column. But if you are somewhere else and try to run it, it shouldn't even run. It shouldn't even bother you. So how do we do this? For a sake of simplicity, what we are going to do is we will keep it simple, but later on we'll try to add the complexity. So we'll make a note that column C is where the status thing is, and this is what it is. So we are going to go to the developer thing, and this is module 1. You can add different modules if you want. Module is where a chunk of code can sit. You can write multiple pieces of code in the same module. I'll add a new module. This way you'll know how to add things as well. So you can add a module. When you right click on the module, you'll see insert. You can add a module, user form, or a class module. These are different kinds of things that you can introduce into VBA. For now, we'll stick to module. Later on, you can figure out how to use the other two. So in this module, we are going to say we would like to write a sub. So sub, and then we'll want to give this a name. So we'll say this as mark as done. A key thing to remember is you can't really have spaces like this. That kind of a naming is not allowed. So this is where most coding you would see this kind of a camel case kind of a thing. Mark as done. Other people might use mark as done. I'm not a huge fan of underscoring in my variables and things like that. It takes too many keystrokes. So I like to use the camel case. And you don't need to open bracket as well. You can just hit enter and VBA will write the necessary end sub, capitalize things for you. I don't know whether you can make it out in the live, but that sub is in a different color of blue. They're kind of very subtle. I'll try to tweak this and then see if that keyboard text. Okay, let's just make this something ridiculous like that. Yeah, you can see now sub is in a red color and mark as done is in black color. And it might not be a bad idea to add a comment at the beginning to explain what your intentions are. This way you'll know what you're trying to do. Again, a good practice, not necessary, but feel free to do what you want. Check if you are on column C, then print done in the selection. That's pretty much it. So for now, we'll ignore the check part. We'll just assume you're already there and then do this and then later on implement the check. So you can use either selection. Selection means selected thing. But many times what happens is if you're in Excel, you can select a cell. So right now I'm selecting a cell. You can also select other kinds of things. So for example, right now I am selecting an object, a box object. I'm still selecting, but I'm selecting an object. Whereas we would like to do things only when I'm selecting a cell, not the other kinds of things. So because of this, the selection object is a little bit dicey one to work with. It'll If you try to say selection dot value, it has only meaning in the context of a cell. But if I select something else, it doesn't have a meaning. So this is why you may want to try some other options. There is another object called active cell. This is the cell that is currently active, where your cursor, if you try to edit, would be edited. So the active cell is okay. Not the intention there. Mm. So if I select a big bunch of cells, my selection will hold all of this range, but active cell is the top corner. You can see that that's kind of highlighted in a different color. So that's the active cell is usually the top left of your selection. Again, quite helpful if you want to do things like that. So you may want to try the different things. So we want to say active cell dot value is done. Here the assumption is we are already on column C. You are there when you initiated this macro. So we'll just assume you have done your part, and now we are going to print the word done there. So here we'll put that, and then we can run the macro in different ways, but you can also put a button. I'll show you a third way. We have seen from developer macros, you have seen right click assign macro. But a third way is you can also switch to the Visual Basic Editor. This is really helpful when you are trying to test things out. So normally this is how I would develop things and test things. I'll keep my Excel in focus. I'll keep the VBA, both windows, tile them on the screen. And that way I can select a cell. So right now I'm selecting this, and I can go to my code. So you select, you go to the code, and then while you are looking at a sub, place the cursor inside, and then you can run the code. You can hit that run button. You can also press F5 here to execute the code. So this is another way to run the macro. This way you don't have to build like hundreds of buttons, especially helpful when you have got lots of macros and you're trying to test out internal parts or whatever. You can use this. If you have done programming in other types of software, you're probably familiar with these kind of IDEs where you can run pieces of code and add breakpoints and test things out, step through the code and all of that. I'm not going to get into those kind of technical concepts that are more neutral and relevant for any programming you do. So that's another way of running. And so this works. If I select a cell and I run, I'm getting done there, which is good. But if I select a cell in timestamp and then say done, I'll get done there. If I go to an activity and say done, I lose my activity value there. If I go to a blank cell and then say done, I'll get the word done there. So this macro is only useful as long as the preconditions are satisfied, right? Another headache with Visual Basic is you can't undo the action. So I've made some mistakes. I've filled done in the places where it shouldn't be. And then I realized my mistake. I'm like, oh, I want to undo. If I try to press Control Z, nothing happens because any action you're doing in Visual Basic through the code is not going to be added to the undo stack. So Excel doesn't really know that this is happening. It's kind of happening through backdoor. So there is no way we can undo these actions. This is also why you should be extremely careful when you're trying to implement VBA in any of your workbooks. You have to probably take backups or get into good practice of writing more bulletproof code. All right, let me just quickly glance through the chat to see what is going on. Yeah, I don't think there's anything going on. I mean, some lots of interesting questions, but we are good to go. Feel free to put any questions. Yeah, someone says, don't even pay attention to questions, just go on. I wish I could do that, but the whole point of doing a live stream instead of me recording an hour long video and publishing is so I can interact with you, I can help you out, I can kind of play around with my ideas and bounce things with you. Anyhow, we got that, but it doesn't work if I pick something else. So it would be a good idea to implement that check now. So let's go that. Instead of doing this, I would like to first make sure that we are on column C. Again, there are different ways to do this. I will kind of try this out. For example, before checking, I would like to at least see what column you're on and then figure out that information. So uh, we can, for example, say active cell dot, and this is a great way to kind of self learn the language. You can select any object, type things, and then press dot. It will show you all the methods and properties available. Method is a macro or a function that you can call on the object, and a property is it's kind of its thing, like range dot value is a property for it. And you can see that there is a thing called address. So it will tell you probably the cell address. What we really want to know is what is the column of this. So if I type column, I'll get that. I don't really know what this is going to return. So one way to see what this would be is you can use the debug.print, right? So debug.print active cell dot column print. And the reason why I don't like red color is normally red color is reserved for code errors. This is why I see red. I'm like, oh, probably there is something wrong with that, but it's not really wrong. That's the color that we went for keywords so that you can actually make it out. So I'm going to comment out this portion. This will do is when you run this macro, it will print the active cell column somewhere uh, in there. Where it's going to print is it's going to print in the immediate window underneath. This is where all the messages and alerts can be printed. So let's go back here and let's select this and then run. So you can see here it says 3, right? If I go to the fourth column, it's going to print 4. You can see 3 was the original. Now right now we are on column D, so that's 4. If I'm going here and then running that, come on, you'll get 1. So active cell dot column is going to tell me what column we are on. All we want to make sure is that we are on column 3 before we can set this to done. So this is where if condition can be helpful. If active cell dot column is 3, then active cell value is done. And if, so this is how you would write an if condition. You'll say this, then, and then anything you put in the middle, that will only happen if you're on column 3. That's the check that we are doing. So at this point, I'm gonna edit the text and then say mark as done. So this is the macro. We are gonna and then assign the macro to this. So we don't have to switch back and forth. So now if I select timestamp, let's select this first and then mark as done. We'll get done there. But if I select this, nothing happens because you're not on column 3. So it cannot damage these values. It can still damage outside. It can damage the header. Like the word is now status is gone and it's done. So those things it is still doing. But as long as you're on column 3, you're good to go. Okay. So that's what the code is. A good part of any development is always trying out different things and testing to make sure that only the intended thing is happening and nothing else. So our base condition check if you're on column C is not sufficient. If you want to be careful, you would want to limit this to the size of the to-do list, so the cells where there is an activity. Otherwise you don't want to do anything, but that can get a little bit more technical. I leave that to you for homework. Instead, what you want to do is when it is done, you would want to add a timestamp. Okay, so that's the next activity that we want to do. So we'll need to calculate the time value. This is we're going to try out a few things. So and add time in column 4, column D. So that's the purpose of this code now. What we can do is, so we'll mark it as done, and then we're going to declare a variable. You can declare a variable with the word dim uh, time now, and then time now is, yeah, another way I oh god, time now is now. Another way I test out my VBA code is, again, I don't do as much VBA coding now than back even 5 6 years ago. So sometimes I go into the flow of coding and I'm doing it for a month or two, then I'll remember everything back. But if I'm not doing it, like probably this is the one of the first few times I've done coding this year in VBA. I don't remember exactly what it is called. So I'll type something and then I'll go to the next line. And if I see that capitalized, like, if I'm typing now, so normally I type in lowercase, and then if I go to the next line and I see that N is now capitalized, that is an indicator to me that I probably got that word right. I was trying to access the now. But if you don't know whether this is the correct one or not, you can also use the immediate window to test things out. God, I undocked this. Now this doesn't want to. Okay. Dock on this side, yeah. So you can also say question mark now, and that's gonna print that now result right here. So immediate window is a great place to test out little pieces of code to make sure what it is. Like for example, if you didn't know what active cell dot column would do, you can say active cell dot column, and then that'll print the number 4. So we didn't have to actually test it out like this. We could have done it like that as well. But this is really what we want. We want that to be printed in the cell. So time now is now. So we're creating a variable, we're storing the value of now into that. And then since we are on column 3, in the next column, we should have that value go. So here in the next column, how do you go to the next column? You can use active cell dot offset, and you can specify how many rows and columns you want to offset. So from active cell, I want to go to the next column. So I want to stay in the same row, next column, 0 1. You don't have to really say 0. You can directly type comma and 1. So you might see this kind of code quite often when you go for help or ask ChatGPT to write the code for you. Is time now. We'll have to test this out and make sure that it works correctly. But for now, that's the thing. And again, save this, come back, and mark as done. We did get something here. That's the 24th of September, 6:21. Remember, I live in New Zealand, so I'm a little bit ahead in time compared to where most of you are watching this live. But if I go here and try to do it, or if I go there and try to do that, that wouldn't really do anything. So I'll get this, and I can see 38 and full time here clearly. If I want, I can change the formatting of that to get the actual precision in seconds and whatnot. Any questions so far? I think this is not not the greatest piece of VBA code, but it kind of introduces you to a couple of interesting concepts like the if branch conditions, declaring variables, and offsetting and storing things. So I would want to claim that as a win, and then make sure that I'm catching up with any questions. So there's a lot of interesting discussions happening. Um, for example, Attila says, in order to avoid the header being not overwritten, you can also double check with active cell value not equal to status. So that's a good idea, but see what happens with that check. If I am out here, that doesn't have status, so I'll get done there. We don't want that either. We would like to ideally limit this operation to this bunch here, nothing else. So that might be a better way of thinking about the problem. Uh, okay. Again, if you have got any other questions or comments at this point, feel free to put that. But I think we are pretty good with what is covered so far. So now let's think of some enhancements so that it can be a bit more friendly. For example, what if I already finish an activity, right? And then I click on mark as done. Now, ideally, because I've already done this, I don't want to mark it as doing it again and overwrite my timestamp. But in this case, if I'm already done and then say done, I lose the 621 and I'm now up to 624. This kind of thing is either a feature or a bug, as developers like to call it. So you decide. For example, if you think, oh, this should not be happening, if I'm already done something, I don't want to redo it again and change my timestamp because that's incorrect. Alternatively, you might say, I know what I'm doing. I have selected the cell done and then I'm marking it as done. That means I've made some amendment to my to do item. I probably haven't finished it and now I'm doing it. So I would like to change the timestamp. So depending on which way you view this, you can change the code. For example, let's argue that if I have already done something, I shouldn't be redoing that activity and I shouldn't mark it again as done. So I don't want to overwrite this. I wanted to kind of maybe stop the code there. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and add more checks here. So if we are on column 3, we need to do this. But before we do anything, like whether you have done it or not, you can set the value to done again. That's not really going to change anything in my opinion. But what we would like to do is we would not want to do the timestamp thing if if you have already done it. So this is where before setting the value, it might be a good idea to kind of see what is already there in the cell and then do the operation. So here, um, I'll declare another variable. You can do it in any number of ways. You can write even smarter, shorter code. But when you're explaining to somebody, it's always a good idea to write a little bit longer code so you can see all the logic. So I'll declare a variable dim uh, car value. You'll see these kind of variables in some of my code that I have published online as well. I like to have car value, pre-value like that, current value of the cell. And we don't have to declare the variable or declare its type as well. VBA is a little bit friendly. If I don't say anything, like I don't have a variable called dim car value, and then I say car value is equal to active cell dot value, it's gonna create that variable for me. But as a good practice, I like to declare the variables car value and then use them. If you want to get a little bit more precise, you can also write the word option explicit up top. What this ensures is it ensures that any code that you write here, all the variables are declared before you can use them. So see what happens with option explicit. If I don't declare this variable now and I try to use it, when I try to run, I'll get a compile error. So this is an error that is happening before even the code can run. And then it says uh, variable not defined. So this is a good way to check. So you can write option explicit and you can kind of then it will check all your code before it can do any damage on your workbook. And then when it is in the debug mode, you'll see these kind of yellow highlights and a a marker where the code has found an error and it would have already highlighted that bit there for you. And at this point, you can reset the code by using the stop button to reset and fix the problems. But if I don't have option explicit, I'll comment that out. Then if I try to run, I'll not get any error. The code will run and it will do what it needs to do. So for example, we have selected that, it'll run. It didn't have any problem with the cur values item. So we'll use option explicit and then we'll declare dim cur value. And then when you're declaring a variable, you can leave it as it is, or you can also specify the type of it. You can say as and data type like string, or all these data types are available. Sometimes you don't know what's going to come, so you can leave it as it is, or you can also use a variant data type which says it can have anything in it. You don't have to do anything, you just leave it. VBA is a lot friendlier that way. It will adjust the code as per whatever values come into the thing. So we'll say cur value is my active cell value, and then we are going to do all of this guy if it's not done, right? So in fact, we don't even have to do all of this. We could kind of enhance this condition to do an AND operation. So that says you're on column 3 and you don't already have done, then only we should be doing this. But I'm kind of elaborating this code a bit more so you can kind of see a few other things. So we'll say cur value is active cell dot value. In fact, I'm going to cut this and put that there. So we'll begin the code by declaring a variable and holding the current value there. And then and here we'll write one more if condition. If cur value is not equal to done, then okay, that's not the operation. I don't know what I want to do it like this probably. Okay, yeah. So again, this is what happens if you don't code with VBA every day. You forget what these operations are, because some programming languages, probably Python, uses exclamation equal to, whereas this I thought it's not equal to, but anyhow, then we'll do it all of these things, right? But else, that means it's already done, right? In this case, what I want to do is initially we can later on add another feature. I want to show a message that's saying, you have already done this, hence we are not changing the timestamp. So you can show a message using the msgbox method. You can say message box, you already finished this dummy, and then you can just say VB information plus VB okay only. Like that. So what this would do is, if you've already done something, it's going to show a message box saying you've already finished this. Let's test this out. So we'll select a blank, we'll get done. We'll select something that is already done. We'll get a message that says you've already finished this dummy, with an information icon and OK button. And whatever you put in the title area, that goes there. So this is kind of like a little bit more helpful in a way. I mean, obviously you don't have to be offensive like this, but here I am the developer and I'm the user, so I can call myself whatever I want. But if you are building this for somebody outside or in your organization, you may want to craft these messages in a more approachable manner. But so that's that. You may want to take this to the next level and then say, instead of showing a message like when I select this and done, you've already finished this dummy, I want to give a choice like, you have already finished this. Do you want to overwrite the timestamp? And then it'll have an option OK and cancel. And if I say OK, I'll take overwrite the timestamp. You can also have yes, no, cancel kind of a thing. You'll see these kind of things in computers all the time, right? You've done something, Windows or Mac will show a warning. When you say yes, it'll do something, no, it'll do something else. So you can also do that kind of a thing where instead of okay, you can give them a choice, take the choice information, and then branch your code further out based on that. Feel free to again take that up as a small challenge and figure out the code. Take the help of your trusty chat gpt or whatever AI tool that you would like to use, or figure it out on your own. I think that's more fun. You'll learn a little bit more, and you might amuse yourself. um, so that is the second part. Ideally, the third thing that I would love to do, and this is something that I'm now guessing is probably not worth the time it will take. Not worth as in, it's definitely worth for me to keep talking for another hour, but we already been going on for 90 minutes, so I just want to make sure that we don't go overboard. So the third aspect that I wanted to cover is, once this is built, many times you keep doing and you keep adding new activities. So anything that is done, I would like to take out those activities, either delete them or archive them to a separate page. So they're all done. We don't need to see them anymore. We can just take them out. So that was the third aspect that I wanted to introduce. I want to plant the idea, and I'm hoping that hopefully you can, with some knowledge of VBA, go and implement it. What I will show you is, wherever it is done, maybe, you know, kind of take that, scan through the list, and if an activity is done, then kind of change the font color to, let's just go with that, something like, make it dull so it doesn't get the attention. So any activity done, it should be having a different color, but we don't want to manually color it. We would want to do this through VBA. At this point, I would even challenge you that you don't need to use VBA for this. You can apply conditional formatting as well, so that you're not writing the code. Excel will do this. This is what I mean by Excel has features that will make the idea of using VBA for everything irrelevant. You can use the other features and not write the code. So there is a simple idea that I live my life by, which is, I want to be as lazy as possible. So if I can do one thing instead of two, I'll do one. If I can do zero things instead of one, I'll do that. So this is the whole thing. You don't have to write VBA. You can select this. You can write a new rule that simply checks, is $C4 done? If so, format my font in this color, and that thing is automatically done. And as I do something, it'll automatically change the color. You can see that. But this is probably not what you may want to learn how to do a little bit of VBA coding. So this is where the thing that I'll show you quickly, how to scan through a list and perform an action for everything. It's called looping. It's a very good programming concept as well. So we're gonna clear the rules, and any activity done, we would like to change the color. That's the last activity that I want to show. Meanwhile, if there are any questions or any thoughts or comments or um, things like that, I want to also address this kind of a thing. Joshua says Python is equal to more powerful MS Excel, ideal for small data presentations. Come on, man. This is not at all useful. I think this is the mindset where the, it's not really helping yourself. Forget about organizations or anything. I don't think this is true at all. I would have viewed Excel as a less powerful option many years ago, but given what it can achieve and how deeply it is integrated with the rest of the workflows, not I am not I what I do in my computer, but when I go to client's place and consult or teach people or show, I feel that Excel can solve almost everything that you're trying to solve with other things. Probably not some of the more complex machine learning or stuff like that. But that is anyway a known limitation. But in all other cases, you can use Excel just as well. You just have to know where the things are. At this point, you might argue, oh, I don't know Excel well, but I know Python well. That is all good. So, a good argument to make is if you are comfortable with something, you can say, I know this, I'm using it. But don't draw a box around your mind saying that I will only use Python for more complex and simple things go into Excel. That is limiting yourself. You can test the limits of Excel, you can test the limits of Python as well. Just as that, you can also use Python for doing smaller data things or large data things. You can make things slow in Python, fast in Python anyway. So don't think like this, because this is not going to be a helpful mindset. A good mindset, in my opinion, is think of these as different tools in your toolbox. So you have got Excel as a tool, you have got Python as a tool. You just ask yourself, what is it that I can use today, either to have fun or learn new things or do my job? So then it opens more possibilities. If you're always saying, I'll use this hammer or I'll use screwdriver, then, it kind of limits you. I feel like that. I've seen people get into this kind of some sort of a very loyal behavior towards programming languages or things. That's not necessary. We can use all of them as we want. Anyhow, Vidindra says the online VBA reference is way too technically written and heavy to read. It isn't very helpful to quickly unless you already know and need a refresher, in my opinion. Yeah, so probably that brings to the concept of how do you learn. Good way to learn VBA is just start using the recorder. The recorder kind of gives you some interesting pieces of code that will give you an idea of how the object model is. I'm pretty much self-taught when it comes to VBA. I've learned most of what I did by just experimenting and testing it out and reading through forums. Nowadays, you can bounce your ideas off with ChatGPT as well. So you can say, here is a piece of code. It's doing this, but I would like to add this extra thing. What would you do? And then you can ask follow-up questions like, why does this work? What does this object do? And it'll explain things to you. So try that out. Another thing that I also from time to time do is maybe read a book. So VBA Power Programming is the title of the book. There is different versions for different versions of Excel. So get the Power Programming VBA book and test it out, or get any other book. VBA has been around for 25 years or so, more than that, I guess. So it's a very mature technology. There is a lot of help, books, resources available, and it hasn't really changed that much in the last 10-15 years. The Visual Basic Editor is exactly like this in Excel 2007. Maybe one or two things are missing, but looks exactly same. So you can read a VBA book in Excel 2007 and you will still be able to do pretty much everything in Excel 365. Only thing that you might miss out is the newer objects. Like Excel 365 would probably have a different pivot table object model and a table list object model and all of that than the older one. So getting a newer book is a good idea. But yeah, get a book because that'll give you better explanation of objects and how they work and all of that. So John says, can you write the done to a separate sheet and remove from the working list? That was my idea, but I don't want to get into that because it can get a little bit more clumsy when you are dealing with two sheets, because you need to scan here and then go and put that there and then keep coming back and forth, which will involve more coding. But I have got examples on my channel that kind of do more or less similar thing with other situations. So feel free to search VBA on my channel. You'll find some other previously published videos that take the concept and cover it in a more detail in more different ways. So try that. But anyhow, I'll show you how to loop. The key idea is to loop through things. So once you know how to loop, you just have to add right instructions to cut and paste and all of that. Okay, so like I said, we would like to scan through this, and anything that is done, we would like to change the color. That dull color, while it is all right, it's kind of not visible on the screen. So what I thought would be fun is maybe um, use a strong color and bold this. Anything that is done, it'll pop out so you can see it. The problem with this kind of thing is I don't really know how to apply bold effect or change the color of text. Fortunately, I don't have to know that. I can just select something and then record a macro. So record this. I don't have to name this. And then once I selected, I just want to see what would be the code to change this to purple color and apply the bold effect. And maybe while we are at it, even give it a background color. So this is what I want to do for my done activity. So once I have done this, I record that. I'll stop my recorder and then I'll go to my VBA code and look in the module 3 or wherever it adds. So it says this is the code to do that little bit. You can ignore the last one because we selected some cells at the end. With the selection.font, change this. Font.bold is true, so make it bold and change the interior color to that. So that's the tint and shade that it is using to bring down the orange color in the cell. So this is the code that I want to apply for all my done activities. So I'll go here and then mark as done is one macro. We'll write one more. We'll call this as sub highlight done. I'm writing it as a separate one instead of part of this because you can mark things as done on their own. And then when you run this macro, it's going to highlight all the done activities for you to visually scan them. So in this, the intention is we'll go through the activity list and then for each activity, if it is done, then we will apply that kind of a formatting for all of that. So here, this is a good place for you to start setting some boundaries for the code so that it will only do this and not more, etc. That way it's helpful. If you want to scan the entire column B, there is a million cells there and it will just be wasteful. So you'd want to scan this for the range B4 to B24. Alternatively, you can also go from B4 until the last cell, whatever you want. So normally you don't know how big this is. You know that it starts on B4 and it could be B24 now, but tomorrow there might be 25 activities. So you may want to stop further down. So we know the start cell is B4. So we'll say dim start cell as range, start cell range B4. Now you might think this is a good piece of code, but here when you are saying range, you are not specifying which worksheet it is. So this is the reason why our fill color thing works, because all we are saying is range B3 without specifying the worksheet number, so that it will work on any of the sheets. In fact, it works on the active sheet. Whatever sheet is currently active, that is the B3 cell of that sheet is being picked up. But when you are writing this kind of a thing, it might be a good idea to over specify, that is specify the sheet name as well. So you might want to say sheet 9.b4. But then with the problem with that is if I rename sheet 9 to something else, then my VBA code needs to be updated. So everything comes with a little bit of cost. So you need to think about that. We'll leave it at this. I just want to plant that idea in your mind. And then what we want to do is we want to capture all the cells that are going from B4 until there is a blank cell. We can declare another variable called my range as range. I'm just being a bit lazy with these names. Usually whatever names you're using, you may want to give them good names so they they don't look silly later on. There was a news story the other day about somebody in Australia, or maybe it's New Zealand, I don't know. The name, when you have a child and you're in the hospital, you have to give the child a name. There are some keywords or phrases that you can't use as the name, apparently. I didn't even know this, but the news story goes like this. So a journalist wanted to test out this. So she I don't know whether she had the baby or she persuaded somebody who's having a baby to test this out. But they wrote the name as methamphetamine rules, like a drug that rules. So that was the name they wrote it on the baby's name thing, and it went into the Department of Internal Affairs. Apparently, anything that is like that keywords, they'll just deny the name and they'll assign officially one name, randomly picked name. So she wanted to see what that random name would be, but this fell through the cracks. Nobody checked it, and the kid's name is now methamphetamine rules. So, same thing with your variables. You may want to name them something that you won't later find them meaningless or clumsy. A classic mistake that many people will do is declare variables like a or n or x or something. This is really confusing later down because you won't know what x means when you're writing big piece of code. So my range as a range, and what my range should be is whatever is the range of values that go from B4. In fact, we didn't even need to have start cell. We could have done everything in one go, but we'll say set my range is, and then this needs to be a range. A range can be either a single cell or it can have two, and then it will capture both. So it needs to go from start cell and then go to start cell dot end Excel down. So that would be essentially saying same thing as I'm here, and if I press Control Shift down, I'm selecting. So that down arrow option is the end option. So Control down arrow, when you press it, goes all the way here. So if I am asking somebody pick this all these cells, this is what I would say. I'll say go here and then go to the very last cell that has the value. So you're picking all the cells. So this is what that would pick up, hopefully. So we got that. And then now what we want to do is for each cell in that, we want to check if if you're done, then we want to apply that color. So we'll say cell as a variable and then write for each cell in my range, next cell. So for each cell in the my range, which would be all the activities, we just want to check if your neighbor says done, then you need to be doing this. So if cell offset comma 1 value is done, then that means that activity is done. If so, I wanted to highlight the color and whatnot. So the color code is here. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm just going to adjust all the indentation. So, okay. So now if you see this code, this only works for selection. We don't want to do it on selection. We want to kind of go from cell. So instead of selection dot font, we'll say cell range cell and then cell offset 2. So that means the code will go, it say here, this is done. So cell is here. So then it from here, it goes 2 cells. So that's what that range would capture. Then and then replace all the selections with that. You may want to declare that as a variable like current row and then use that variable as well, but it's not necessary. So that's the piece of code that would check for each cell if the neighbor is done, then apply the font coloring and bold effect, and then continue that kind of a looping for the next cell. It looks a lot complicated, mainly because this internal portion is so verbose. Even just to apply color and bold and background color, 3 things, but there is like 10 lines of code. But that's really how VBA is anyway. The important bit is building up a range that captures all your cells, and then using the for each loop to loop through each of the values. So again, if you have done some coding in other languages, you may have already been familiar with the for kind of concept. But if you have never done any coding, what for does is it will take a collection like my range that has all the cells, and for each cell, it's going to loop through and do the operation. So let's test this out. A good idea to see both of them. And then while we are here, I'm gonna undo this action, and then let's test it. Boom, that worked. Yay! I think we should just celebrate and quit while we are ahead. um, a common problem when you're writing any loops is you might get into crazy things called infinite loops. Again, you'll hear this when you learn programming, is when a loop keeps on running because it doesn't know when to quit. Normally, you wouldn't even have that problem for a for each kind of a thing because you're running it against a collection which has a finite set of objects in most cases. But if you're writing a condition or loop where you're testing for some sort of a condition and that condition is never true, then it keep on running. Like for example, you say um, for, and then you specify 1 to 100, but internally you don't really keep changing the value back to 1, so it never gets to 100, then it never goes there. So that is something that you need to be mindful. When it goes into infinite loop, VBA keeps running until your computer freezes, and then at that point you'll get a kind of frozen error or crashing Excel or whatever. But yeah, instead of doing the highlights, you might want to think, I don't want to highlight, I want to take that row, copy it, Control C, go to another sheet and paste it, and then, man, we do have too many sheets, and then repeat that process like that. So this is the archival process. This is what I was hoping to demonstrate, but I'll leave that to you as homework. So yeah, that's uh, that's kind of in a nutshell how to use VBA. I hope this kind of gave you the initial confidence and put you over that hump many people face when they want to get into VBA but don't know where to begin or what it is or how it applies. I'll talk a little bit more about how it compares with Python in Excel. Right now, probably some of you already know this, but Excel now also has built-in Python support. So you can see this here on my computer. I can write Python code in Excel. Right? Likewise, you can also write Office scripts in Excel. So how these compare with VBA, and when I would use each of them and when I would use none of them, and other features of Excel. So I did talk a little bit in the beginning. I'll talk more about it later once I finish scanning through questions in the comments. But did you enjoy it? Did you have fun? I had lots of fun. I was kind of skeptical because anytime you're showing coding, there is all sorts of things that can go wrong. Like we did have out of memory error. That was something that I didn't see many times before. But I'm glad everything went well, and we have achieved everything that I wanted to achieve. So cool. Let me Vikrant says, can you apply filter and add blank row on every row below done? You can add whatever you want. You just have to record doing some of these actions to figure out the individual pieces of code, and then later do it. I would I would also ask what is the intention of filtering and then adding blank row, and should those operations be even done in that order, or maybe there is a different way of doing this. But yeah, can you declare module level constraints which are accessible across different subroutines? Obviously, you can declare a variable above here, like above all the subs, and then that will be accessible at all of them. In fact, there is so much more to VBA than I'm showing. I mean, obviously, there's so much more, but mm, we haven't really touched on many things. Like you can add events, things that will happen only when certain thing is done. So, for example, every time you click on a cell, you can run a macro. So the macro wouldn't run until you click on the cell or you double click on things like that. So that's a cool way to enhance the functionality. For example, a simple, obvious fix for some of the usability issues is if I double click on a cell, I don't want to type anything. I just want to automatically mark it as done. So double click should be done. You can easily add that kind of a thing to your code, and just make sure that the double click only checks on column C and not on other columns. That's another great way to enhance the thing. Dija asks, can I use ChatGPT instead of learning Excel and Power BI? Uh, yeah. I mean, you can try. If I'm imagine for a minute there, I'm not trying to be a friend, and I don't have to be. I'll be honest here. I'll say, um, while that there is a lot of temptation to use these tools so that you can substitute the hard work, we are not there yet. So don't try to take the shortcuts. Do the hard work. It doesn't take that long to learn these technologies, and once you know, then you can use the tools better. Okay. Yeah, that's it really. I mean, you can spend hours and hours on Chat GPT or other tools and you might still be going in circles. So it's better to invest some time, learn. I'm not saying invest money or invest buy courses or anything. That's not necessary 8 times out of 10. But yeah, put in some time, put in some hard work, do it yourself. Then you'll know how to use the Chat GPT even better. Um, So this person asks, will there be other lessons in VBA? I would love to do another live stream sometime down the line. I do have some dedicated videos on VBA on the channel. I also run a VBA course. If you want to learn more about VBA, feel free to check that out and sign up. And yeah, if there is sufficient demand, I would love to do more VBA videos as well. Um, yeah, as you can clearly see, I enjoy VBA coding. I like talking, so I might do some. If you like this, feel free to like this video, comment, let me know, tell your friends to watch this. That way, I know that people are watching this, then I might make more of this. Okay, so let's bring this to the next thing that I thought would be highly relevant. Given the number of things that you have already in your disposal, at your disposal, and then the number of things that Excel keeps piling on top, where does VBA fit in and why or how relevant is VBA in the landscape of things that we got today? So, this is where personally my usage of VBA over time has been coming down. This is uh, the reasons for this are twofold. Number one, I'm doing less and less work, not because I don't like doing work. It's just that the nature of my work has changed. I used to work as a business analyst. I sometimes now work as a data analyst or data lead or whatever based on the work that I get as a contract. But more and more nowadays, I am into teaching and working with on YouTube and all of that. So because of the nature of my work has changed, there is less need for me to code. But the second obvious reason is, and this is probably even more relevant when I'm working with Excel, either with the client or when I'm teaching, I tend to use the features that are natively available That means less code, less maintenance, less hassle. So going back to my core principle, which is I want to be lazy, I can see that VBA gives me that chance to be lazy. I can hit a button, I can sit back and let the code do its thing. But if I don't even have to hit the button and the thing is already happening, then even better, right? We don't have to do anything. So this is where features like conditional formatting would have been a great fit, um, instead of us doing the highlighting, because it can highlight the things for us automatically. Like here, I could have written a rule to do that instead of macro, and it will work. So this is where the amount, the number of reasons for which I need to write VBA code keeps coming down over my lifetime. But going back now, given the reasons to code, what would you pick? Whether you go with VBA, Python, Office scripts, or something else. So here is the latest thinking for me. This is the thinking as of 2023 September. This will always change as the landscape evolves and new technologies come in. But right now, any kind of data automation, that is, if I want to take data from different places, combine it, mash it, take this file and that file and merge them together, this kind of things I used to do with either complex formulas or VBA back in 2010. But now I use Power Query for all of those things. So Power Query is built into Excel. It works great. It works within Excel as well as Power BI. So it's kind of learn once and use it many places. Amazing. So data automations, I use Power Query. You can go to data and then see this. I got plenty of videos on the channel. My Excel school and Power BI course, online courses cover in depth on Power Query as well. So I teach this. I encourage people to use Power Query for data related stuff. Then the second thing, any kind of looping kind of things, like go through a list of items and do certain actions. I normally evaluate the reasoning for that. Like for example, here the highlighting is a cosmetic thing, and I'll try to avoid writing code and use features like conditional formatting or whatever. But if it has to be a little bit more elaborate, then I'll try to use the formula approach as much as possible. For example, if I want to go through a list of items in Excel and then do something on them, earlier there were not many choices. We would have to either go to VBA or do something. But now with the Lambda functions in Excel, you can scan a list and then do things on it. You can map a list, so you can take something and then apply some activity on top of it, another formula operation, or you can reduce it, which will take a list and shrink it. But you don't even have to use them. You can use other things like um, you know data operations can be solved with vstack, or filtering kind of operations can be solved with filter, removing duplicates can be solved with unique. So all of these are new functions that are available in Excel now, which were not there just a couple of years ago. So this means I don't have to think about VBA as an option, because I got all of these here. But let's say we come to a problem that cannot be solved with what Excel has to offer. Then what are my choices? My choices depend on where I need it. If I'm doing it on my computer for myself, I don't mind writing a bit of VBA code, because for me, coding is not just to solve problems. It is also, uh, you know, like doing a crossword. I like doing things just for the sake of doing things. So I like to write code for fun. This is the reason why yesterday when I wanted to kind of have something fun to test my live stream, I created this because I wanted to see how to show a message box, but with an image of my live stream thumbnail and a button and a custom format title. Initially, it didn't occur to me, and then I thought, oh, I'm a dummy. I know you can make a user form, so I made a user form and used that to create that. So, uh, you know, for me, coding is a little bit of fun. I like to do this just for the sake of doing. So, if it is a simple thing and I find that Excel cannot do it, I write VBA code to automate it. I have lots of fun. I know the language, and I can pick up and learn new things or relearn things. I also like to play with the Python feature that they have added, but the limitation of Python is Excel's Python can only talk to the cell values in your workbook. It cannot do anything more than reading the data and building something in Python for it. For example, you can't use the Excel Python to highlight things like this. That's not possible. You can't even use it to mark things as done. That kind of thing is also technically not possible. Technically, you can kind of tweak it around and write some very weird code that can produce that, but let's just not go there. So the Python in Excel is good for reading the data and doing some operations on top of data and return the Python related objects like either data frames or images or charts or whatever onto the grid. So I find that Python is, just to be honest, it's not as exciting to me in Excel as normal Python is. Like, I like working with Python normally outside of Excel, but inside Excel the implementation is not really up out there. Plus the code doesn't even run here, it has to go to the cloud and run, so there are lots of other issues with it. I got a video on the channel that talks more about that. Then comes the third one, which is Office scripts. And the problem with Office scripts is twofold. One, it's a good thing because if I write an Office script, I can run it on my computer. I can also save this Excel file on SharePoint or online places and run it there as well. So that means it can run the code in browser. Whereas the VBA file that we have built, it will only run on the computer. If you try to open this in browser view or whatever, it wouldn't run the VBA code. So it has a limitation of being able to work only in a computer, either PC or Mac. Whereas the Office script would work elsewhere. And it can also integrate with other Office platform tools like SharePoint or Power Automate or Power Apps or whatever. So that means I can have a Power Automate flow that would trigger an Office script, which will then do something and then send an email through Outlook. And I have got a video that explains that entire flow on my channel, like how do you send emails from Excel through Outlook using Power Automate and Office scripts. But that is very rare case. In majority of the cases, the automation tends to be a bit more involved, like being able to do things here, as well as sometimes even integrating with the Windows API or something. Like, you want to be able to do something on the Windows itself. Like a classic case for which I built a VBA code and got paid very handsomely is using the data in Excel, generate and automatically send emails with attachments and letters and templates and formats. This is something that I repeatedly used in clients' places, and every time I would get really good money out of it. So that kind of a thing would have been pretty hard to achieve with the Office script automation, whereas VBA would have been like really simple for me to do because I can write a piece of code in Excel, I can write a piece of code in Word. Word also has VBA, and connect this and that to automate the whole flow with a click of button. So that's how I have used VBA. So I hope that gave you some clarity of where these fit in. Personally, for me, still the go-to choice is VBA if I have to automate something. But the better question that I always ask is, do I need to write code or can I avoid it altogether? So I'll try to avoid it as much as I can. But if I'm writing, I'll write it. And I like to take it up as a challenge. Like, if I can't figure it out, then I'll have fun figuring that out. But many people, you may not have that luxury of thinking it as fun. You may already have a deadline or you have a boss or a client saying, give me this code by tomorrow or whatever. In that case, you just have to pick and choose your battles. So if you have somebody paying you to write Python code, do that. If you have somebody who says, we want something that is deeply integrated with SharePoint or whatever, then maybe use Office scripts. Or if you have got a client that says, I'll pay you good money to build a VBA macro, just do that. Yeah, hopefully that gave you some clarity. Let me see what other things are there. Um, Yes, KV says, what is Python in Excel can do? Check out my channel. There's a video on Python in Excel that I put recently. So, yeah, it's just a couple of weeks old. Definitely watch it. I mean, not just you, but anyone who is keen to know what Python in Excel can do, what are some of the limitations, and what I think about it. Feel free to check that out. And the other thing that I forgot to mention with VBA is VBA is super compatible. It will work in pretty much any version of Excel, whereas Python in Excel only works in Excel 365. Right now, it is not even generally available. Office scripts only in Excel 365. So, most of these things require you to use a specific version of Excel, whereas VBA works in many versions of Excel. So, yeah, if you are dealing with clients or customers who might be using different computers and different versions of Excel, VBA would be a better way to distribute things, because then you don't have to think about, oh, would this work there or not. Pranjit says, given opportunity to learn today, would you start with VBA or Python? Both languages seem like viable alternatives. Yeah, I would probably learn whatever is my immediate need, but I wouldn't ignore the other one. So whether you are, like, if you are in college and you're just having all the free time in the world to learn, probably start with Python. But if you're on the job already using Excel every day, then maybe learn VBA, because it can immediately take your productivity and improve it. It can automate things for you, or it can give you some interesting challenges. But then later on, definitely learn the other thing, whatever you pick first. So Attila asks this. I probably don't know the answer to this. That's why I didn't highlight this earlier. But can you obtain the result of Azure CLI output to your Excel? Let's say want to find all the available machine sizes. I'm sorry, I don't know what CLI is, or I mean, if it's some type of data source available in Azure, then you can pick it up using Power Query. But I have never done it, so I don't really know. How would you go about automating an approval process that requires multiple conditions? I was told Power Automate can do it, but not familiar with it. Any other choices? I think, yeah, approvals, that kind of a thing, workflow where multiple users would be involved and they will all need to open the file and do something or click a button. Power Automate is probably an easier one. Um, yeah, search it up. Even though I've personally done it, I have not put a video on it on my channel. I'll I'll I might do it later this year or next year. I don't know when I'll get to that. But yeah, search it up. It's not that hard. You might find somebody who's more well versed in Power Automate, and probably ask them to help you out for 30 minutes or something, on consulting basis or whatever. So yeah, that could also be an option. But yeah, try it out. All right. So that is kind of that concludes that. I'm gonna make sure that I save this file and I upload this as a link in the video description, so you can grab this. It kind of looks like a mishmash of sheets, but all the code will be there. You just have to right click on any sheet and go to view code, or go to developer, Visual Basic. You'll see the code there, that has all the things that we wrote. So feel free to check this out, and definitely try VBA. Even if you don't have any intention to use it practically, VBA is a good gateway language to learn. It's a very easy language to learn. And once you know how to code in one language, newer languages become increasingly easier to learn. So don't listen to people saying VBA is dying, don't learn it, that kind of nonsense. People have been saying this pretty much all my adult life. Not that I'm old or anything, but I'm hearing this for last 15 years now, and it gets old. I mean, this technology is here for a long time. It'll be there for some more time for sure. But whether it is there or not, learning how to program in itself is a good skill. Once you know how to think in that direction, then you can actually go really far with either VBA or other languages. So definitely learn it, definitely use it in some of your work, and yeah, go from there. It was really fun doing the live stream, and I'll hang around for a bit. But if you've got things to do, feel free to drop off and catch up with your life. And thanks for joining. And it was fun. I'll see you again next month around the same time, but also on the weekly videos. I put videos every Tuesday, so feel free to check that out on the channel. And if you're about to leave, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe if you've not already done that. JC says, hello Chandu, using data entry forms and VBA, I have two questions. How do you simulate a master relationship, and is it recommended to share the workbook in a network? Mm, okay, so the couple of things here, and probably I have you have to explain more about that master slave thing that you're talking about. Like, what do you mean by that? Is it one form having another form on top, like that kind of a thing, or something else that you're thinking? So clarify that. But um, for me personally, the go-to choice, especially if I have to have a form and get people to put some data in and then capture all of that and do something with it, whatever may be the thing. Here the problem is because multiple users need to use it, and sometimes they may have to use it simultaneously, not one at a time, and they may have to use it from their own computers or different places. uh, I'll try to think of a solution that is not purely VBA, because VBA has those limitations, right? It has to run on your computer, and it's kind of like one at a time. So if one thing is running, the other operations will have to wait. And if somebody is doing something, then probably the other person opens. It's going to create some more complications that you may not have anticipated. So a better solution would be, again, this may not fit everything, but a solution that I would try to think about is maybe set up a forms like Microsoft Forms or some other data entry forms to capture the data collection, and then use the automation tools, either Power Automate, Power Query, or VBA or Office scripts, to pool that data into one place, and then later use that data for my analysis or whatever. So this is what I mean earlier when I said any kind of data automations, I don't use VBA. So this in my mind is kind of like a data automation. You're trying to get some data and control and validate it. So I'll try to avoid VBA for this because it involves a lot more work than you anticipate, especially if you're building forms. Then they can get more complicated quite quickly than you would imagine. And the number of lines of code you have to write and touch points you have to set up, edge conditions you have to test, all of this is too much work for very little to gain. Hopefully that is helpful. But yeah, please clarify what you mean by simulating that other thing. I'll try to add my 2 cents later. I do all my work with Excel and Excel with VBA. Yeah, that's great. Ryan says VBA is amazing, automated multiple reports and saves me roughly 12 hours a week. So there you go. All these testimonials for VBA. Which says, nice presentation. I appreciate the fact that you started this at 5 a.m. a few hours into daylight savings time. This was the crazy part. I scheduled it. I completely forgot that we are switching to daylight savings. So even though it's 5 a.m., my mind and body, it's still 4 a.m. for me. And yeah, given that it was our kid's birthday, we had a big night last night as well. But yeah, no regrets. I like doing this. I enjoy doing my live, and I'm glad I could do it. Um, Sainer says, I'm your old subscriber, sir. Thank you so much. Uh, Learn with Salim says, what software do you use for recording and making Excel videos? I use TechSmith Camtasia, Amazing software. Definitely try it out. Vindra says, can you share more insights on the features and capabilities of the immediate window for interacting with code and the Excel sheet? So, immediate window is kind of like a one line code at a time kind of a thing. You can write one line of code with a question mark and it will run that code. And if there is an output, it will print that. You can also use immediate window to send any debug.outputs. So if you say debug.print something in your code, when you're looping, let's say you are looping through and you're highlighting, but it doesn't highlight the third column and you don't know why that is happening. You can use debug.print to figure out what were the edge points of the address and why it is working or why it is not working. Yeah, I mean, there's not that many features in it. It's kind of like a back-end console that you can see in between outputs or things that you don't want to see on the main thing, but you just want to see in the back to scan through the results, intermediate results. Hopefully, that is helpful. Gopinath says, what sort of coding you're suggesting for Excel work in Google Sheets also? I don't think they're compatible. Yeah, probably just stick to formulas in that case. But Google Sheet has got its own scripting language called AppScript or something. So I have not used that at all. Um, JC says, thank you. You're welcome. First, Fist to Fingers says, how well does VBA work with Power Query? Can we automate data extraction with Power Query? Thanks. I think it kind of works a little bit, not all the way. This is because VBA is an object driven thing. So it can only act on objects that are available to it. But the object model of Power Query and Power Pivot are not fully exposed to Excel. So we can't do everything inside Power Query through VBA. I think you can still manipulate some of the query objects and stuff like that. My friend Ken Pearls has done quite a bit of work in this space. So you may want to check his website. It's called Excel Guru or Ken Pearls. Just search online, you'll find and see if there is any tips on automating Power Query with VBA. Darren says, I'm not too sure what VBA is. I think you probably have just joined the stream and watching the end of it. Just rewind and watch the beginning. You'll understand what this is. All right. I think that's it. I hope you all had fun. I had lots of fun. And we have been talking for like almost 2.5 hours. So I'll shut up now and I'll go back to, uh, yeah, probably I'll go downstairs and start prepping for the breakfast. It's going to be all celebrations today. Our kid's birthday, and later in the evening we are going out for dessert, so it's gonna be fun. Yeah, Niranjan says how to protect the code. You can protect the code. It's not bulletproof. You may have to try a few other things like compiling and distributing it as an executable or something if you want to be really sure about your code. But yeah, Raja says thank you so much, everyone. Have a good weekend and stay awesome. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.